All right, everyone, I'm going to open this September meeting of the Stratford Wetlands and Watercourses, Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission at 7 p.m. First order of business, approval of minutes of the May meeting.
I'll approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. John. Old business? Looks like we have none. So we're going to go right into new business, and Pat, our attorney's going to summarize what happened at the court for these two docket numbers, Red Bluff Rita and Mountain Development.
So we had two pieces of litigation. Let me see, which one did you put first? Does everybody have copies, or do you want copies? Because I do have copies. Yeah, you know what? Just, should be plenty, so that's, I'm gonna give you one of each.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah, sure. No problem. I realized that you attached them, but then I was like.
Yeah, they were in the
"Make copies."
packet,
I was
but-
like, no.
Yeah. I'll pass this along.
Let's see, on the agenda, it's Red Buff Rita first, so we'll do Red Buff Rita first. So if you remember, Red Buff Rita was a case where Attorney Steve Bellis challenged the inland wetland regulations and basically said that there were a whole bunch of changes that we needed to make in order to be in compliance. So we did make a few changes prior to when we got the complaint, but then the rest of them we said fine, we'll go to court, and the judge found in our favor in every case but one, and the only case he found that he was a little concerned about the regulation was the regulation that requires them to come back to renew a permit when the property changes hands. So that's the only thing in Red Buff Rita that was against what the commission already had in terms of the regulations. I did speak to Kelly, and I also spoke to initially to the counsel for the DEP, who was co-counsel in this particular case, to basically say, is there a way around, or can we adjust the regulations to, for the commission at least to be able to get, say, notice that a change is made. So we could certainly do that in the regulations. We couldn't go so far as to say, at least at this point, that there was a requirement that they come to the commission just on a change of ownership. So that's Red Buff Rita. If you have any questions, I'm happy to to answer them. But and you can certainly read the opinion. But that's the only that was the only issue with regard to Red Buff Rita. Otherwise, found everything in favor of this commission and the regulations that we have on the books. So that's Red Buff Rita. And then the second one had to do with mountain development, which is the 99 Hawley Lane. And we've had a number of conversations about that case, and that was the case where we didn't have a recording, and the judge found in that case that there wasn't substantial evidence in the record of an adverse impact to the wetlands, so that everything that and obviously we were a little bit of a disadvantage because we didn't have a recording of your decision session, but the judge found that it was sort of speculative to say that and remember, so there was a decision in the record, but he found that it was done post the hearing, and there was no record of the collective decision of the commission. And really, we were sort of hampered because of the lack of the recording. And if you remember, that happened because we, on that evening, didn't cancel the meeting, but canceled the quote public hearing, which meant that the technicians didn't understand that the meeting was going forward and we needed a recording of it, but there wasn't a public hearing. So, so that's what the court found in that case, was that the permit that they requested, that there is a wetland, but it was not, there was no actual development in the wetlands, that what development there was in the upland review area, and that there was not a clear impact to the wetlands, that each one of that the applicant had addressed each one of the issues, saying, oh, you have a problem with storm drainage, here's how we're going to deal with that. You have a problem with this, here's how we're going to deal with that. And that there was no counter expert testimony to basically say, wait a minute, that's not true. So there was lots of comments from the public and comments from the commissioners about the magnitude of the project and its closeness, that the development was upslope from the wetland, that the wetland was a substantial wetland, that it was in the headwaters of Bruce Brook. There was a lot of information, but that there was no expert testimony and there was no substantial evidence that what the applicant had proposed was not going to address all the issues that were present or that were brought. So that's what the court found in that case. So so inland wetlands will now have to issue a permit for that development, and obviously that development is a development that's still going through zoning, but that's not within your jurisdiction, that's within their jurisdiction, and they've designed the project to be compliant. So that's mountain development.
Pat, all the stipulations that they did agree to, are those still valid, or?
That's what I would put in the permit, because that's what,
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
to make sure at least we got.
right, it's not a permit stripped of any conditions.
Okay,
I would, the permit that we would issue would contain all of those caveats.
thank you.
Does the permit need to be reviewed by the judge before being issued to the?
No.
Okay, all right. Because this permit's being issued as a result of litigation, does this commission want to review the permit before I submit it to the permit holder?
Yes.
I
Okay,
think that would make
okay,
sense.
yeah, okay. So I'll have that prepared for you next week, and then that'll also give you time. I know there was some confusion and chaos with the postal service, and some of you didn't get your packet, so I'll give you guys time to review the actual memorandum as well in the meantime.
Just one question, Kelly. So we're going to review the permit as written, or you're going to send it to us, right? But it's really a moot point, though, right?
Well,
can't change anything.
we're gonna, right, so the court basically said there wasn't substantial evidence in the record to show an adverse impact to the wetlands. Now, obviously, so the applicant has made some representations that, this swirler or that thing is gonna stop X from happening or Y from happening. So the permit gets issued. That doesn't mean that you give up your opportunity, that if there's a problem on the property,
Of course.
that's not an impact on the wetlands. So, for instance, if they say, oh, here's how we're going to manage the stormwater, and it's not going to get to the wetlands, or we're going to manage all these things, we're going to have tanks, we're going to have this, we're going to have that, to the extent that there is an impact to the wetland, that's a violation. So they'll get a permit, but, sort of their promises have to come true.
Of course, okay, that's good, thank you.
Question. So how will the wetland be monitored for adverse impact from, say, stormwater? Is there anybody going to keep an eye on making sure that everything is working as it should?
Yeah, I think we can offer that as a condition of approval. So, and that's why I was suggesting that you might want to review the application or the permit, because I'm going to prepare conditions of approval and you guys can say, nope, we don't like that, or actually, can we add this in? So I can certainly include that, similar to how we have been with other permits we've been issuing, where they have to provide some language on the land records, noting that they have the stormwater system that must be maintained, et cetera.
Like if it was inspected, again, by some expert to make sure that stormwater isn't, having an adverse impact on the wetland, like that it's not raising the water level of it, if it's not changing it into a lake or a pond, is that it's changing it from a wetland to something else because of an increase in stormwater runoff. And then the other thing, again, is maintenance of the system, monitoring and maintenance. Because this is a very big project. This is probably one of the biggest projects we'll see. And it is the headwaters for the Bruce Brook system, which runs right through our town. So it's a big one.
In the original discussion, were there requirements that they agreed to here? That we would hold
Yeah,
their feet?
and what I would say is, if we're going to issue a permit now, we're going to issue it with the conditions that we think are appropriate for an approval. And if they have an issue with that, well, then they can bring that to our attention. But I would include everything that you think is necessary
I was just,
on an approval.
was there something on record that they agreed to here that would be easy to say, look, you've already agreed to it, so that's...
I think there were a number of things that they said, well, here's how we're going to manage this, here's how we're going to manage that. So basically, if you read the judge's decision, he says, well, if you have an issue with X, the applicant says, here's how they're going to address that. And so it's perfectly legitimate for us to put on the permit, okay, you're going to address it by having this swirl pond, or you're going to have, I would go through the, sort of with a, fine-tooth comb, the decision to say, oh, the judge says, well, here's how they're going to address that, and there's not going to be an adverse impact to the wetland. Okay, even the box turtle, he says, well, they promised they would do A, B, C, so I think that from that perspective, we can include that in the permit. So, honestly, the judge's decision is a good, sort of roadmap for what he says. Oh, this is how they said they're going to address that. So I'm not worried there's going to be an adverse impact on the wetland, because if they do that, and they have an expert who says that's going to cure that, then that would be a requirement that they would do that.
But we didn't have a counter expert testimony. When water comes off of rooftops and off of parking lots, and enters a wetland, it's not the same as groundwater flowing through a wooded area into a wetland. And that's what the impact on the wetland will be, the quality and the quantity.
And I think, right, and that's a lesson to be learned in terms of making sure that we have an expert, an equivalent expert, because that's one of the things that the judge did say in the decision is, hey, if you're going to, the law basically, the case law comes down and says, if it's something that it doesn't require expert testimony, he said in the decision, these things are technically complex. So let's say you're an electrician and somebody is asking you about electricity, then you put on the record, well, I'm an electrician, and so I know how this works. So if you, for instance, we had a wetland scientist on the commission, and he said, I know how this works, and here's what you need to do. Okay, that would be expert testimony. Or we can have a third-party expert come in and assist the commission, peer review even, what the applicant is proposing, so that we do have that expert testimony in them, because that's another lack with regard to this decision. And you read the judge, sort of puts it out there and says, well, there wasn't any expert to counter the testimony of somebody who had credentials who represented the applicant. So if, moving forward, we need to make sure that we have that when,
And I think we need to state it on the record, because I think Dennis actually was a plumber, and actually, I think that would count as an expertise in that area, because he was talking about that mostly during.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that has, I've seen commissions do that in the past, where somebody says, well, I'm an engineer, and so you can then insert your expertise in there, but, we do need to put that on the record if that's the case, and then we would try to sort of piece together all that expertise.
Yeah, I think that we, should have had somebody that's like a wetland biologist type of an expert. And something else that I've noted, that that almost every time a developer hires a scientist, they always, they're never offer anything contrary. In other words, they always,
That's like when you hire a lawyer, they're a zealous advocate for you, whether you're guilty or innocent. That's why you have to have an independent, right, Pat?
That's exactly
the
right.
whole
And so
thing.
that's
Joe's
why-
right.
So we
They're not going to go against their employer. I mean, so you
Right,
got to have an
and the whole-
independent review.
Right, and the truth is that if they went to somebody and he said, wow, this is not a project I could support, then they're gonna move on and hire somebody else, okay? They'll get to the person who can, either give them good advice or, basically support the project.
For Kelly, but she's not impartial. They don't consider her impartial.
And I think, there are certain things that she could opine on, but it's important so that in the record, you have somebody who has the credentials and who is countering whatever the expert on the other side is saying. Say, wait a minute, that's not completely true. But
So moving forward, should I state on the record my background before I'm opining? Or does that not, I don't know if that matters compared to the commission versus staff?
well, I think it's helpful.
Okay.
If you have a credential and you are, either providing a staff report or countering what somebody is saying, I wouldn't leave it out, but I also think that having a third party, an expert, to come in and review the plan, review the information provided, and then provide his own report or her own report, and also, have all that on the record. And, you wear enough hats already, so it's difficult. I mean, like, it's better to have a third party and, put the resume on the record and the memo and, countering whatever the expert on the other side is saying. That would be, that would have been helpful in this case, but just in general, it's helpful.
so what we need is a zealous advocate on our side when we, like in this case.
And that's similar to the Teakwood project then?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious if because we had that third party, they withdrew their complaint completely because I think they saw the writing on the wall with that.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we had the same third-party review for 99 Holly, could we have been positioned similarly?
So we should try to get together a list of zealous advocates who could speak on our behalf in a similar case in the future.
Correct. I know some municipalities have like a standing, they call it a short list of companies that they've already gone out for a RFP, or RFQ rather, and that ensuring that they're qualified, and then you can pick from that short list, or we can select from the general populace of consultants as we need them. So we can go either way.
So at this point, the public is out of the picture? In other words, can they just send in a second opinion or concern if they had to?
With regard to this application, no.
Yeah, no, okay.
No. But, I mean, and sometimes you'll find your expertise will come from the public. sometimes either groups of people from the public or somebody who has a background, or, I mean, you often find it like with an engineer, is that somebody will come in and say, listen, this guy just told you that this is how this retaining wall is going to be supported, and I'm telling you that, here's my credentials, here's my expertise, and I have a different opinion. But, we should sort of formalize it so that we're not sort of like hoping and wishing that we've got some, some substance.
Okay, let's move on.
Can I call our attention to just a couple lines? To Pat's point, they're at the bottom of page 13, where it's just very clear about, while expert testimony is not required to support proposition that water will flow downhill unless impeded. So I just read that as common sense things, right? And then to your point, Pat, if an administrative agency, next page, chooses to rely upon its own judgment in a technically complex area, it has an obligation to reveal publicly its special knowledge and expertise so that a person affected has an opportunity for rebuttal. So I think that's the key too, right? Like then they could come back
Yep.
and say, well, okay, then we're gonna do this. So I left out something else too, that they were saying that, without the filtration system, unless, in the absence of any technical infirmities in the detention system. So I took that as the judge is saying what they're proposing to do is enough. So unless it fails, which is unfortunate, but until and unless it fails, there's no impact. And then just on the top of page 15, to your point too, about the box turtle, it references their letter, it references in addition, a conservation easement is proposed. So there were some remediations to handle the box turtle, it sounded like too, but.
If everyone remembers, I remember when we went to executive session, Pat and I were of the opinion that this was a loser from the start. We
Yeah.
knew this was going to happen. That's why I wanted to pass it, because I wanted to make sure we still have all the stipulations they gave. As long as we have that, that's why I asked you, are they going to continue with what they offered us?
Yeah,
That's the main
no, we're
thing.
going to include that on the permit.
Okay, I have a question. So as far as experts and a list, how do we go about that? I mean, what's the best way for Kelly? What's the best way for us? I mean, do we each bring in somebody we know, heard of? Does
So-
Kelly get to choose?
No. So we can do a request for qualifications through our purchasing agent. We won't actually be purchasing anything or expending funds, but it'll just be a chance for notice to go out to qualified consultants, and they can respond to our requests. They'll send us their qualifications, and we'll have to put together a package of what we're looking for. And then the commission, I could bring all of those respondents to the commission, and we can review them all and make some determination of that short list. We can accept them all on the short list. We can accept 1, 2, whatever we choose.
So do you need a motion for that?
I would like a motion for that, yes.
Okay, so I make a motion to give Kelly Kerrigan permission to, was it RFP? RFQ, to go out for an RFQ for a list of qualified experts for the commission.
We have a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimous.
One other note here, the lacked recordings, how can we make sure that that doesn't occur again?
So it was a public hearing for Teakwood that we canceled before the evening that the decision was made. And when I posted notice of cancellation of the public hearing, I just said the public hearing's canceled, and I didn't make a comment, but the regular meeting's still going to occur. At least I don't think I did. So, in the future, but the notice will say, public meeting's canceled, regular meeting to still occur, and then confirmation with IT that they will be there to record, because they have to physically be here to record. I didn't know that at the time either, but.
Okay, let's move on to administrative report.
All right. So a few updates on some administrative applications and some violations. Beginning with an older permit that is now expired for 577 Holly Lane. The applicant has not yet quite filed their conservation easement, and I've been working on this with them since January. I think I'm finally starting to get some movement on that. However, they have not begun the wetland creation or wetland restoration part of their project, and yet their business is fully operational. And in meeting with the permit holder and their attorney, they've indicated they don't wish to do that, to do the wetland restoration or wetland creation any longer, which was a condition of the permit. So I advise that they need to come back before this commission to gain permission to remove that condition of their permit. However, the permit has also expired, so I have not gotten responses from their attorney, and I will be issuing an NOV shortly. And that NOV will be ordering them to come before the commission to discuss the next steps. Because I believe that permit's from 2016 or 2017, so it's a pretty old one.
Yeah, 2017.
And then just moving on to some administrative applications that were processed into permits. 160 Disbrow Street, 2025-10A for fill placement. That permit has been completed, and they have planted blueberries already on their property as well. 2025-11A, construction of a two-car garage at 195 North Pasture Lane. 2025-12A, landscaping and minor grading at 155 Rosebrook Drive. And that also includes a lot of native species restoration and invasive species removal, which I thought was really neat. And then on the violations front, 1290/1292 Elm Street, I have the permit application, but I've been awaiting the permit fee, and I'm told that is now in the mail. And that was for the driveway installation within the Upland Review area. And they also will be doing some mitigation plantings to provide a buffer between the wetland and the parking area that they paved. And then 7 Oakview Drive and 951 Beaver Dam Road. That violation involves some litigation because a property owner crossed their property boundary onto their neighbor's property and cleared in the Upland Review area and installed a driveway. And I just got word that they are seeking me for deposition, and I referred it to the town attorney. So I'm waiting on that. And then still working on the Disbrow Plainview area, wrapping my head around what to do in that area. I have to check in with engineering to see if we did receive funding to assess drainage, but I do not know if we received that yet or not. Hold on, I'm just writing this down.
Kelly, I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Jumping back to the permit that expired over at the construction of the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
They are open and they are in business. It's just that, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, there's no wetland sign-off for their CO, which is, I've toyed with this for a long time because you would think we should have a CO or at least a partial of some sort, but them being able to occupy the building does not really involve if the wetland has been mitigated or not. So I'm not sure how that would work.
So they got a CO without having a wetland sign-off?
Yeah, in that process, there is no inland wetland sign-off currently.
Okay, we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, okay,
For the future, anyway.
yeah. Okay. Where am I in my notes? Sorry, I have my notes on my iPhone, and I'm not a good iPhone user. Okay, and two more. At 767, 737 Holly Lane, that was for tree removals within a wetland, also involving multiple property owners and some encroachment. I've been back and forth with the solar company that permitted the tree removals and have not gotten very far, and I've informed them that they will be receiving a formal NOV in order to appear, because I have not been able to get an application for them retroactively for the work and then to do mitigation plantings. And then 190 Beaver Dam Access Road, I believe I've already told you all of this one. There's a stone masonry wall was constructed along the edge of Beaver Dam Lake without a permit. A fine has already been issued and paid in the amount of $500, and the homeowner is actively seeking a consultant to come before this commission to try and obtain a retroactive permit for the work. And that'll be up to this commission whether she receives that permit, whether there's some conditions of approval, et cetera. And I did talk to a consulting firm that was engaging with the homeowner, so I know that there is activity occurring. She just hasn't been able to select a consultant yet. And I don't know if that's because it's the summer and everyone's busy, I'm not quite sure. But she said that she's talking to 4 consulting firms right now, trying to find someone to prepare the application for her. And that's all I have.
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you, very short meeting.
Well, we're missing a couple of people, some have it.
Kelly, do you know what's actually going on maybe for next month? Yeah?
I do know